key to any advocacy campaign is gathering accurate information. And a wonderful way to get colorful and detailed and emotive information is by conducting interviews. But this information needs to be balanced and accurate, and it also has to ensure everyone's safety. Interviews for human rights or social justice can come from a range of sources, like victims and witnesses, of course, but also medical experts or perhaps former collaborators who can help explain motivations. There are three things to keep in mind when conducting interviews for human rights or social justice: credibility, sensitivity, and confidentiality. It's important to establish the credibility of the person you're interviewing. You want to ensure that you know who they are and, of course, what their relationship is to the event. Second, sensitivity. You have a duty of care to understand the interviewee's personal circumstances and to respond appropriately. Third, you need to protect the interviewee's confidentiality and identity before, during, and after the interview. First and foremost, you are going to seek out credible sources. So how can you contact these sources? Are communication channels like email safe? Or perhaps you have a local contact or a telephone number that you're going to use. In any of these circumstances, you need to be careful about contacting people in safe and secure ways. You need to think about what venue you will use for the interview, and where will your interviewee feel most comfortable. Who in your team will conduct the interview? Of course, you're going to want to dress respectfully, but you might want to consider whether perhaps wearing an official business suit might make the interviewee feel uncomfortable or suspicious. In preparing questions, you want to think about writing open-ended questions. For example, rather than when did Mine X open and how many jobs did it create, you might say something like, I understand that in January, Mine X built a road through your village. What was the impact of that road? Questions like this elicit better responses, and they show that you've done your research, and they boost your credibility. When you introduce yourself, you will need to seek permission from the interviewee. Will you use video or audio or write down what they have said? When listening to responses, keep in mind that body language may not be reliable, particularly in different cultural contexts. For example, avoiding eye contact in our culture, may signify that someone is not telling the truth, but in other cultures that may be a sign of respect. Interviewees who have undergone difficult situations may react strongly out of shame or anger, cultural taboos, or perhaps a desire to suppress difficult memories. Don't use religious expressions like, oh my God, and don't patronize the person that you're interviewing. For example, you don't need to say, oh, that must have been awful. In general, you don't have to editorialize. Your role is to listen and to record. Be compassionate and courteous and sensitive and respectful, but you're not there to show pity. Be calm and attentive, and certainly avoid physical contact like hugging. It may be that you want to offer comfort, but remember, it's not your role. Your role is to record. If you yourself feel like crying, ask for a brief recess. Let your interviewee talk at their own pace and avoid asking invasive questions. And allow for pauses, allow for silence. Look for signs of closed body language or shaking or sweating or fast breathing or physical pain or discomfort. At this point, you may want to check in to see how they are doing or to suggest a break if that's what you see. And you should have a contact for trauma counseling that you can suggest if needed. When working with interpreters, it should be made clear that the conversation is between interviewer and interviewee. The interviewer should look directly at and speak directly to the interviewee. For example, rather than saying, ask him what he saw at the market, it would be better to be phrased, what did you see at the market? And the interpreter should answer verbatim. Not, he says that he saw 3 people in a white car, but I saw 3 people in a white car. Ensure that the interpreter doesn't summarize what they hear or answer questions on the interviewee's behalf, or offer opinions or have long conversations which exclude you and the interviewee. After the interview, you want to think about ways that you can substantiate the claims of those that you have interviewed. So follow-up can be quite important. For example, are there news reports that might confirm something that you've heard? Are there other people that you want to interview? All of this will be important to follow up, and the more careful records you keep, the better. In terms of recording, your data always need to be protected. At a minimum, identity should be kept in coded documents, even if it's just a locked Word document, but these should be separate from the interview themselves. But for greater security, whole interviews can be transcribed immediately, and then they can be encrypted. You also need to consider that sharing information by email or phone, perhaps you want to contact headquarters, may or may not be possible. This will depend on the location where you're conducting the interview, but it is the interviewer's responsibility to know what's safe. When conducted with credibility, sensitivity, and confidentiality, interviews effectively gather critical information for human rights and social justice work.